Guys, what's going on? Welcome to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath, and I am joined by James, the Comic Book Savant, my spinner wreck bro, for a conversation about a new documentary about the comic book shop experience. James, what's going on?
Nothing much. Thank you for having me.
This was your idea. You brought this. I didn't even know this existed until you told me about it. You were like, have you seen this new documentary, My Comic Shop Country? And I was like, no, but it sounds like something I should see, because you and I both have a ton of experience in the comic book shop. Like, we are comic book guys, not just comic book movie fans. We are the people that were, in the lines for the shop's pull lists every single week. And I don't know, this documentary really captures the ups and the downs, the good and the bad, the sweet and the sour at the same time. Yeah. So I don't know, you have, I know there are a couple of cats in this documentary that like you have a personal experience with them, right?
Yeah. So two of the comic book shop owners are from Greensboro, North Carolina, where I lived for years, and I frequented both shops for on and off. I lived in that area for about 14 years, and most of that time I went to either or comic shop, because they're really two of the more well-known comic shops in the area. So I knew both comic shop owners and had extensive experience with both. So it was really interesting when I stumbled across a trailer for it. I was like, oh, wow, that's kind of cool. I know these guys in the content of just, we've had previous conversations about physical and digital and different mediums and how it is affecting the comic book industry. So them kind of doing this documentary, focusing on it, was very interesting to me. And it kind of goes along with the different kind of conversations we've done in our previous videos here. Yeah. And so I thought it would be something like, if you didn't know about it, like I recommended it to you, and we quickly was like, this could be something we can do an open discussion, and we can open up the discussion to the fans of both of our channels on. Let's like talk about it, because it's tying into so much even right now with the pandemic and how it's affecting the comic industry. It all kind of intertwined, and this was done a little bit before, but it's so timely when it's dropping now and how it's affecting the industry, that I thought it would be something great to talk about. And
It's crazy too, because kind of we don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but the storyline, if you go to IMDb and you look at the summary, the capsule summary, it's like the importance of comic book shops to, well, so one, it's like the community aspect of a comic book shop, and then two, like a lateral story is comic shops are dying all across America because readership is down, the audience is getting older, prices are going up. It's just a really tough time to be in a comic book business. And then here this thing arrives, like right at this crucial time in our culture where, people are stuck home. Comic book shops that were already struggling are now closed up for,
possibly for good.
Possibly for good. I mean, it will remain to be seen what happens, but I just know that like businesses that were already struggling are now, like, they're not even open at all right now. Everybody, like, people are staying home. And I know some comic book shops are doing like curbside pickup and stuff like that, but I don't know. It's a really timely documentary. And I don't know, where should we go from here? Like, there's so much to cover here as far as like what it is. Where do you think we should start?
I guess just on, I guess let's talk about like how we feel personally about like local comic shops.
Yeah,
I know,
okay.
I know, for me, I've told you this story, and I've told on my podcast before, how I met one of the John Hitchcock, which is one of the owners, which I was talking about. He owns Parts Unknown, the comic book shop in Greensboro, North Carolina, and how I'm a huge Nightwing fan. And I went into a shop kind of cold, hadn't been in it before, and he recommended it to me. He saw me like kind of looking at the book, and I kept going back to the book, and he told me about the character. He told me about who wrote the book, who was drawing the book. He even said, you can try it. If you don't like it, you can bring it back. I'll refund you. But, but I see you keep being drawn to that particular book, so, I was like, I didn't, I said, well, I don't know much about the character. Who's this Nightwing character? And he told me it's Dick Grayson and everything. So it was just always so very hospitable and very knowledgeable. And I always, behind that, I always frequented his shop because I just thought he was a cool dude. I just walked in kind of cold. And so I always had like a pleasant experience. And same thing with the other Jermaine or Lord Retail as his kind of alter ego.
There's Lord Retail merchandise. There's like coffee cups and like a little...
yeah. And I was there, and when that was really starting to be a thing, and it was a sight to behold for. And you get a feel on how
cryptic. Hat, man. That dude can wear a hat.
Yeah, and it's a whole thing with him, and so it's interesting too to see how much he's further evolved, because he was coming into his own, for good or for bad, because you even get glimpses of how eccentric throughout the documentary, how these certain comic book shop owners can be, and how it can maybe hurt their business or help, and it's kind of a thin line that they get into with him that we can talk about further. But it was interesting, and he was one of the main subjects he was spotlighted quite a bit, and he shot a lot kind of in cooperation with his shop, that you got to see the inner workings of the shop, that I thought was very interesting. And even certain interviews they did with his staff where they said, like, their insight on him and what is the persona and what's really him. And that's very much this individual. He's very knowledgeable. You see how much work he puts into doing what he does, but sometimes he does can become like maybe a pushy salesperson a lot of times, and it's less fan and more, do you really care about what I like, or are you just trying to sell me? And it's a thin line with him, and where that persona, he gets a little bit too caught up in that persona. You can see that because it's the whole bobblehead, and like that wasn't a thing. I mean, it was the beginning and growing of that moniker when I was really around the shop a lot.
Well, they talked to his parents, and they're like, "Do you know what his alternate?" And she was like, his mom was like, "Lord Retail, yeah, we know."
Yeah, it's a thing. It is a whole thing. Yeah, so so that was very interesting, because I knew these two pretty intimately and talked to them for hours and upon hours about comics and so forth. So it was super interesting insight, and then learning about other comic shops all across the country. It was an interesting insight, that I thought was fascinating. How about
so none of my comic shops were in the documentary because my comic shops are gone. So when I was in my early 20s, I had a great comic book shop in the town that I lived in, and they lasted a few years, and they went under. Oh, my childhood comic book shop went under when I was a teenager, I think. Like every comic book shop I've ever loved or supported or whatever, they've all gone away. The one that I was going up till Free Comic Book Day of this past year, they closed their doors.
Right. I remember you posted on Facebook about that, and and how it affected you, because and one thing I did like about this is the Anthony. It's about his experience with his particular local shop, and then it takes him on this journey as that store closes and the community built around it, because it is a community that can form around a comic shop. So it was interesting that with his closing, it set him off on this whole journey of diving deeper in what the meaning of a comic book shop is to a community in a particular town and the people that go there. Right. So it hits so many different levels on that. And
we should say that it is framed so that it is the framing devices are this was my comic book shop. I loved my comic book shop. This was my community. Now my comic book shop is gone. And I want to come back to that towards the end of the video, because I have a question for you, something I was unclear about. But yes, it's about community. It's about like how that it gives, because I think comic book fans, especially from our generation, I don't know about younger than us, but they're outsiders often, right? They're people who are looking for a community because there's not like a sports. In our time, the quarterback was not watching Marvel movies because there were no Marvel movies,
right?
But that was you paid for it. You made it came at a cost, but these were safe places. These were safe havens.
Safe haven for sure. It wasn't for the cool kids, and now it has infiltrated pop culture where it's a more acceptable thing, and it's a more thing people go to comic shops, or in this more boutique style of comic shops where you saw certain ones they spotlighted that they're hybrid things. You can play board games, or they showed one in Philadelphia where it was female owner, and it's a coffee shop, kind of bakery, eatery, and comic shop, and a store, merchandise store for she delved in a lot of different areas that they become more customized boutique like experiences, as not just because they kind of have to do those things to survive, and they kind of touch on those different things that you have to kind of be able to evolve on the fly to stay relevant in the current times to stay afloat, because if you're just a comic shop, can you still survive in this climate nowadays?
Well, and yeah, and only one of the comic book shops that they highlighted in this documentary, well, maybe two, but the main one, like, I'm thinking of the one that you purchased your Nightwing comic at. Like, he only sells comics, and he does not mess around with statues and Funko Pops and like whatever. But it seems to be working for him. He seemed kind of upset about it too. But the idea is like, well, just like comics.
Yeah, because it's a thing too, because they didn't touch on that, but those two shops, Acme and Parts Unknown, because Acme was just, they were okay. So probably when I started going to them both, they were kind of probably maybe on equal footing. Acme in that city went from like one location. They might have more. I know they definitely had. Well, they used to have two locations that could dwarf his store, as far as the amount of merchandise. So he probably loses a ton of business, and it probably was a third. It was a third store too that was they might have went. I think they actually closed. So it is competition, but Acme is like, not to say they're like Golden Apple, like in New York or whatever, like they're that huge, but an equivalent in this town, because Greensboro, North Carolina is a huge college town. It's not a huge city. So to have another rival comic shop that has two locations, you have the persona of Lord Retail. He's probably the business, and the business he might be getting. They're big competitors, and with him being so old school, and Acme and Germain is more of a, they sell comics, they sell Funko Pops, they sell shirts and statues, and they do things with movie theaters when new movie. They're a big competitor that probably take a lot of business. So he could be really bitter on the share that he might have used to have in the community to where he is now. Yeah. I think maybe a lot of that with bitterness about it.
Those bitterness from several of the people involved, including the guy that the person whose comic shop closed, the director's comic shop. That owner was super bitter, and he was like, "This is your fault. So, pay customers. We're closing because of you," which is fair. I mean, it is fair because those are valid criticisms. Like if you have a pull list, you gotta get those books because they're paying, like they're ordering those books for you, and there's a cost for that. And if you're not picking your books up, you're costing money.
And I love that insight, because I don't think people might think about it on that level. Yeah. Oh, they can make that money back. No, like they showed a lot in how that ordering works and how a lot of it is guesswork, and they have to pay for that up front. And it's not like a bookstore, and I worked in a bookstore for years, and that you can return books years and years later if they don't sell. And, that return policy is so different. If they even had a third of the return policy, and they even say that in the documentary about, if we had that kind of return policy, then our margins of error wouldn't be so razor thin. Like they mess up one or two orders on a book and like order way too much. They're stuck with that inventory for might be years before they can make that money that they have to pay to get those books up front to even break even. So
and that's so we got to talk about Diamond now, because that's a Diamond comic distributor's policy. Diamond is the comic book publishing company that back in the day, 20 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, it wasn't that long ago, there were tons of places you could get your comics. You didn't have just one place, but one by one they've dropped, and now there's one monopoly on comics distribution, and they set that policy: non-returnable. You buy the books up front. Shops have to pay for everything that they buy when they buy it, and then hope that they can sell it later. So this documentary kind of it shows. It really, it shows the transparency of, they just say, like, I would not recommend it. Like, I love my comic book shop. I wouldn't recommend anybody start a comic book shop. Like, it's Mark Waid. They got Mark Waid there, and he's like, right. Don't do it.
Right. And
it's
they
like
make
teaching.
that
They compare
very
it to teaching.
Yeah, and they all say, do not start to open up your own comic
How do you
shop.
make $1 million in comics? You start with $2 million.
Yeah, it's crazy, and that was and once you see that behind the scenes and what goes into it, it is very clear that it is not a potentially profitable business. A lot of people just do it for the love of, and so it's a thing. They definitely make that clear, and things that you might have never known when you walk into your comic shop. And I think anyone that frequents a local comic shop and wonder why they close, or wonder why it's so tough, or that it shows you so much insight that I think comic fans need to see. I think it's not a perfect documentary, but it definitely is valid in so many points, and I think comic fans need to watch it and support it.
Yeah,
because I think it opens up your eyes to a lot of things you might have never thought about, and how it affects the industry and how you move and how you frequent a comic shop, how it could make and or break it, as well. So I think it was super cool in that way.
I wish that they'd been able to cover. It's about an hour and 25 minutes. I wish that it had been closer to 2, because I think there's things that they could have gotten into that they just didn't. I would I enjoyed the business aspect of this is how the process works. This is where the stuff comes in. But there's not a lot of criticism for the comics industry themselves. There's a little bit. Most of it comes from Paul Levitz, the former publisher and head of DC Comics, who's talking about he's like, they used to have. I don't remember how exactly he says it, but the gist of what he's saying is there used to be enough comics that you could follow them. Now there are hundreds of comics every single month. It's like, the good news is there's a ton of comics that come out every single month. The bad news is there's a ton of comics that come out every single month. Exactly. I wish they'd spent more time talking about how, just because the market has shrunk. We talk about, I know I myself have been talking about this since the beginning of Serial at Midnight. The market shrinks, fewer customers supporting this massive amount of publishing, hundreds of books every single month on the back of the smallest audience to date. And that's one of the reasons that we have the problems that we have now. That's why it's shrinking, is because the audience is aging out. There's no new blood coming. I mean, there's some new blood, but there's not a lot of new blood coming in. And there just wasn't for me, I would have liked more focus on another reason that comic shops are failing, is because the amount of product is choking the consumer.
Exactly. And I think too, and something we've talked about and we've covered as well here, and you had in your videos and I have my videos and the podcast as well, and we talked about it there as well, about the shift into, people don't go into comic shops. When you can go into bookstores or go on Amazon, and the trade paperback and hardcover edition, that is cannibalizing a lot of sales for people going into a local comic shop buying singles or floppies. They do sell those as well, but when you can go on Amazon, that's a retail outlet, or the place you turned me on to, a Ollie's bargain outlet, or
but I should say, the reason that those books are in Ollie's is because they did not sell. They're dead stock. You got thousands and thousands of books that are dead stock.
Yeah, so it's like it's amazing, and like I said, it just make you think about so much. But I agree with you, and it's so interesting right now. Post, this is a whole other video, but just post pandemic, the things they're kind of foreshadowing in this documentary, we're gonna see a dramatic shift post when things finally settle back down. We might lose a lot of these shops that we saw in this documentary on the tail end, and I think the industry is gonna have to shift and adjust and start thinking about, maybe, like you said. I know certain publishers have already said, post this, they're gonna start shortening up their lines and condensing, and maybe they'll do things like almanac style, where maybe you buy a $20 almanac, where those individual issues still come out, but they're all just bound in one thing. And if you want X-Men, you buy X-Men. It's $20 a month, and you get all the different X-Men books in one thing. It's going to have to be some kind of drastic shift, because I think it's just like you said, it is way too much product.
And one thing that I heard it was just this week I heard this. I feel like the documentary also, to my memory, they don't talk about digital distribution really at all. They don't talk about digital comics, which is a huge elephant in the room. Yeah. But one thing that I heard is that there has... Up until now, digital comics have been rising, and they have peaked, and they have started to decline. So that means that there was always the idea that, we'll just shift to a digital model. Now digital is potentially in decline as well. That implies a problem with not just, it's the fandom itself is this is something's wrong, right? And I don't know if this was the forum for that, if this documentary was the forum for that, but I don't know. Maybe it was, because it's all part of that sauce. Yeah. Why are people leaving the hobby? There's so many reasons, and they got into some of them. Right.
But it was like you said, they didn't go deep, and they could have had another half an hour or so where they started diving into that, and it was very just lightly touched upon, and it's a whole nother thing.
The tagline of the documentary too, and I might be nitpicking, but I like the documentary quite a bit. I want to be clear. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I'm just trying to bring a little bit of balance to it. The tagline for the documentary is, well, hold on, it's not in this. It's like, hold on. Can you vamp for me? Okay, here it is. Stores close. Here it is. Stores close. Communities last forever.
Right.
But the store that closed that our director went to, the whole end of the movie is like the community has dispersed.
Exactly, and they don't know why. They didn't really know. It's like, well, life happened and things. So I was like, well, yeah. So I totally get what you're saying.
It's a good tagline.
Yeah,
but that's not what happened.
Exactly, and not at all. It was the complete opposite. Yeah.
Also, I'm unclear. I mean, I don't want to spoil. It's not like a story, but like the end of the movie, the end of the documentary, I don't understand what I saw. Like, maybe we should talk about it off air, but it was some fuzzy storytelling.
Yeah. Okay. We don't want to ruin it for people because this is definitely something I feel like is worth watching for you guys, and I think
for sure.
it will offer a lot of insight. So I think it's worth a watch. But we can talk about it.
Okay. So for comic, do we have anything else we want to talk about this? Like, it's really good. It captures the good and the bad of a comic book store, and it kind of shows. Can I tell you what I think? I think this is kind of going to show what comic book shops were like right before the end.
Yeah, I think it's going to. Yeah, because I think it's like so weird that this just came out, and then what was happening at the time this came out, now and where we find ourselves. It's going to be a snapshot to the death of the modern day comic book shop. You know.
I mean, they say in the documentary that like people say that people say comics are dying, but they're not dying; they're contracting. But I don't think I agree with that. I think that I don't think comics are ever going to go away, but I think the comic book shop is its
dying.
Days are numbered for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely they're dying, and you saw a couple like innovative takes on it, but what we once knew is going to be no more.
What did you think about the high dollar, the premium comic book shop that sold, the one that was by the drummer Vegas, from System of a Down, and they were selling like $1 million, like they had a whole vault full of. What did you think about that place?
It's not for me.
It kind of grossed me out, to be honest with you. I was like, this is not. This is about.
It's about. But I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube, and I've seen them appear on a lot of different podcasts and stuff like that on YouTube, and that's the whole thing. But they really cater to a very select market, like celebrities. When they go to Vegas, they make specific trips to that shop to get these rare comics, and it was kind of it is gross where you saw like they got a whole vault and they're up on the vault and they're just it's premium. And
everything's in a CGC slab, so you can't.
And that's a whole thing for me because I'm a purist when it comes to comics. And like you can't read that. You own it and it's a commodity, but I didn't think comics were supposed to be that. They had the potential to be, but that's not why I bought them and why I would read them. I read them to enjoy them.
It also bothered me that the guy that they were talking to who worked at that shop, this says a lot about me. He said the F word twice in like 2 sentences, and I was like, this is a weird choice. You're in an interview about comics, about the life of the community and all that stuff, and you're like, it just didn't seem professional. It seemed very, it fit with the character of who he seemed to be and what that shop was. And again, not for me.
That's him, and I've seen him on a lot of videos, different places, and that's him. And I feel like certain times, either you're cool or you're trying to be, and I feel like he tries to be this cool persona. And you're very awkward, and it seems very forced, and it just comes off that way. And I think this accentuated that fact. But I happen to have seen him do guest spots on other podcasts and talk, and it's kind of a thing. And it's like, oh, you were the person that wasn't really cool in school, but you always wanted to be, and now you're like in an in thing, and you think talking that way and acting that way is going to get you noticed. It's not. It just makes you look annoying and kind of ignorant.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
You burnt, comic guy. You just got burnt by the. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it just, I don't know. I felt very like the whole point of the thing is about community and like kindness, and that whole thing doesn't fit with that. It's the opposite of that. It's not about community. It's about bucks.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's a really great documentary as far as like just portraying the snapshot in time comic books as they were. I gather it took place between like 2015 and 2019.
Mm-hmm.
So that window, I recommend it. I wish that there was it's digital only right now. I've heard no talk about a disc thing like that. So, but it's affordable. It's a $3.99 rental. It's a $12.99 purchase.
And it's available on Amazon, like you said. I bought it off of iTunes. It dropped a couple of weeks a week or two before, and then you got it dropped this week on Amazon, and it's worth a rental. Or I didn't feel bad, because I didn't have the option when it came out for it to be a rental, but I didn't feel bad because I wanted to support it because I thought it was just interesting after watching it. I didn't feel bad paying the $13 for it.
Yeah, I mean, $13 is not to support something, support a creator, support what he's trying to do. It's not bad at all.
Yeah. So either way you decide to go with it, guys, I think it's worth picking up either for a rental or as a purchase. For sure, it has some worthwhile content in there.
You want to put a pin in it there? You feel like we covered it?
I think we're good. I think we did a good job covering it. And for the record, I enjoyed it just as Heath did. If you hadn't gathered that already officially, I think it's worthwhile, worth checking out for sure.
Yeah. You want to tell people where they can find you?
You can always find me at comicbooksavant.com or also on YouTube at youtube.com/comicbooksavant or on social media at comicbooksavant.
And there's a lot of content with me at Comic Book Savant as well. We do Spinner Rack Bro podcasts and discussions about things similar to this. So, I don't know. I would like to know from you guys, the viewer, do you have a comic book shop? How is your comic book shop doing? Show them some love. Go in and hug them. Just look them in the eye and say, I see you.
Exactly.
And, all right, guys, thanks so much. Take care for Comic Book Savant, Serial at Midnight. We will catch you later.